The galaxy had not known true silence in 1,000 years, yet now even the stars seemed afraid to breathe. Along the outer rim, entire armadas had disappeared into the dark, leaving behind only static and empty space. No wreckage, no distress call, no trace of battle. Fleets that once filled sectors with light had been erased so completely that even their names faded from record. The first losses were blamed on pirates, then on hyperspace storms, then on malfunctions. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Something was moving out there. Something vast, silent, and human. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the air trembled with unease. The hall was a cathedral of light and glass, filled with the leaders of 100 species, each trying to speak louder than the others. Reports projected across the air in glowing letters, but no one dared to say the word that haunted them all. Terrans. The human delegation seat was empty, as it had been for decades. Earth had withdrawn from the Council after the Great Accord collapsed, vanishing behind its borders without a word. At first, the other races had celebrated, glad to see the unpredictable Deathworlders finally gone. But now, years later, they whispered that humanity had gone quiet only because it was busy building something the galaxy had never seen. The Council speaker, an ancient being of glass-blue skin and 6 eyes, slammed a hand against the podium. "We cannot continue to lose fleets without explanation," he shouted. "Every patrol sent near human space has vanished. Every drone, every probe, destroyed or missing. We are not dealing with pirates. We are facing something that understands us too well." Across the chamber, the Vrixa High Marshal hissed through sharp fangs. "Then it must be humans. Who else could disappear entire armadas without firing a shot?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Talor ambassador adjusted her crystalline wings nervously. "But we have no confirmation. The Terrans signed no treaties, declared no wars. They are ghosts." "Ghosts don't bend gravity," growled the Drask warlord, his massive form casting a shadow over half the chamber. Sensors detected gravitational distortions the size of moons. Only something enormous could cause that. "Or many things," whispered another voice. "A fleet." The word hung in the air like a curse. No one wanted to believe it, but the reports kept coming. From mining colonies on the edge of the void, from scout ships that never returned, even smugglers spoke of seeing lights moving through the dark, patterns too precise to be natural. Planets along the border began to evacuate quietly. Trade routes were redrawn, cutting wide arcs around the so-called silent zone, a stretch of empty space where the laws of physics seemed to tremble. Every ship that entered came out changed, or didn't come out at all. The Council ordered an investigation. 1,000 probes were launched into the silent zone. 998 vanished. The 2 that returned carried no data, only static, but one had a single line carved into its hull, burned there by intense energy. "We are still here." When that message reached the Council, panic erupted. The speaker demanded calm, but his voice was drowned by the roar of terrified leaders. The word spread faster than any official order. Earth's fleet was alive. No one knew what the Terrans had built in the dark. During the old wars, their ships had been small but cunning, unpredictable machines held together by willpower and madness. They fought like no other species, turning asteroids into weapons and stars into traps. When the wars ended, humanity withdrew into silence, sealing its borders. The galaxy thought they were broken. That isolation had finally humbled the reckless species from the blue planet. But now it seemed their silence had been the sound of construction. On a small frontier world named Varist, an old war veteran sat outside his tavern watching the night sky. He had fought humans once long ago and carried scars from it. His people had defeated them, or so he had been told. As he looked up, he noticed something odd. A star flickered, then vanished. Not blinked, vanished, as if swallowed by shadow. One by one, the other stars followed, forming a line that moved slowly across the sky. The veteran felt a chill crawl through his bones. He whispered an old Terran phrase he'd learned in war, one that every soldier feared to hear: "Eyes up." The next day, the entire colony of Varist went silent. The Council sent fleets to investigate, but the moment they crossed into the border systems, communication ceased. Ships vanished without a single explosion. In their place, sensors recorded waves of distortion, ripples moving faster than light, bending time around them. Scientists couldn't explain it. Strategists refused to believe it. The speaker called it a technical illusion, But the soldiers, the ones who had fought humans before, recognized it for what it was. "It's them," one admiral said quietly during a closed session. "They're testing their engines. They're letting us hear the sound of their return." Weeks passed. Fear became a shadow over every world. Alien news networks broadcast theories and propaganda. Some said humanity had created sentient warships that moved through folded gravity like living beings. Others claimed the Terrans had found something ancient, technology left behind by the precursors, and merged it with their own. But no one had proof. No one had seen a human ship in 100 years. It was the fear of the unseen that tore the galaxy apart faster than war ever could. In a dim research outpost orbiting a dead star, 2 scientists watched their instruments blink with unreadable signals. "It's like something is dragging light itself," one whispered. "I think it's watching us." They laughed nervously, trying to dismiss the idea until the power failed. When the backup systems came online, every monitor showed a single symbol, an old Terran insignia, a blue circle with white lines radiating outward. Earth. The scientists stared in silence as the words beneath it appeared slowly, letter by letter. Observation complete. The feed cut off. In the council chambers, paranoia grew. Armies prepared for a war that hadn't been declared. Fleets massed near the border, their captains whispering that if they couldn't see the enemy, maybe the enemy could see them. The speaker authorized the creation of the Vigilant Network, a massive ring of satellites meant to scan deep into the silent zone. The first week, nothing. The second week, faint readings. On the 13th day, every satellite recorded the same impossible event, space itself expanding and contracting as if something enormous was moving behind an invisible curtain. One satellite managed to transmit a brief image before its destruction, a dark shape the size of a small planet, surrounded by lightning made of gravity. The council refused to release the image publicly, but within hours it leaked. The galaxy saw it. Entire populations panicked. Some called it fake, others divine, but to those who had fought humans before, it was unmistakable. The Terrans had built a fleet not for war, but for deterrence. They didn't need to attack. Their existence alone was enough to paralyze the galaxy with fear. And yet the strangest part of all was that no human voice ever spoke. No message, no demand, no explanation. Only silence. The galaxy's greatest powers tried to reach out. They sent envoys, diplomats, scientists begging for dialogue. None returned. Not destroyed, not killed, simply gone. Erased from every record as if they'd never existed. The longer the silence lasted, the more the galaxy understood. Humanity had no interest in being found. On a quiet night, the speaker sat alone in his private chamber, staring at the image of that shadowed ship. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those lines of gravity twisting through the stars. He remembered the last words the human ambassador had spoken before leaving the council years ago. "If we ever return, you won't need to see us to know we're here." At the time, he thought it was arrogance. Now he realized it was a promise. Beyond the outer rim, deep inside the silent zone, something stirred. A ripple passed through the void, silent but strong enough to shake distant moons. Hidden beneath folded dimensions, thousands of ships drifted in formation, their surfaces absorbing light itself. They had no markings, no transmissions, no sound. Only the faint pulse of power deep within their cores. Each was a masterpiece of human engineering, a vessel that could fold space around itself and vanish between seconds. Together, they formed a fleet that had never been seen but always been feared. In the command core of the largest ship, a woman stood before a vast window of dark glass. She wore no insignia, no medals, only a simple uniform marked with an old Terran emblem. "Report," she said quietly. An AI voice answered. "Observation phase complete. Foreign fleets detected at perimeter range. No hostile actions taken." The woman nodded. "Maintain silence." "Affirmative." The ship's lights dimmed, and for a moment the reflection of her face merged with the stars outside. Cold, calm, unyielding. "They still fear us," she murmured. "Good, fear keeps them honest." Far across space, the council debated whether to prepare for war, but deep down they already knew the truth. There would be no war. Not because they were ready, but because humanity had made sure no one would ever dare. The Terran fleet remained hidden, moving quietly between dimensions, unseen and untouchable. And though no alien eye had ever truly witnessed it, Every civilization felt its shadow in the dark, pressing gently against their fear. No one could prove the Terrans existed anymore, yet every telescope, every radar sweep, every deep space scan trembled with the same unanswered question. What if they're watching right now? And somewhere beyond the edge of light, the unseen fleet moved again, silent as breath, steady as judgment, crossing the stars like ghosts made of gravity. They left no trace, no sound, only the faint distortion of space itself, the kind that made even gods afraid to look too long. Humanity had returned, but the galaxy didn't need to see them to know they could feel them. Fear is a strange thing in the galaxy. It doesn't travel through ships or radio waves. It moves through silence, through whispers, through the things that people refuse to say out loud. And now that silence had spread like a sickness. Entire civilizations began to behave differently, without any official order or war. Trade ships avoided the outer sectors. Convoys rerouted to avoid a stretch of darkness now called the Terran Veil. Captains prayed before entering hyperspace. Soldiers sharpened weapons they hoped they would never use. No one could explain why, but everyone felt it. The heavy weight of unseen eyes watching from somewhere beyond the stars. The first signs were small. A cargo ship traveling near the border vanished without a trace. A week later, a mining colony in the same sector went dark. The security footage recovered by rescue teams showed only flickering lights, static, and a low hum that made listeners sick to their stomachs. Some claimed they saw shadows moving between frames. Others said it was just static interference. But one engineer swore that the sound was a voice, slow, calm, and human, whispering something he couldn't understand. The report was buried by the council, but it leaked anyway, spreading across the networks faster than fire. It was enough to plant a seed of panic that nothing could uproot. On the Vrixa homeworld, news anchors spoke in cautious tones. There are claims, one said carefully, that the humans have returned. Her co-host laughed nervously. That's impossible. Earth withdrew centuries ago. The anchor nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear, then explained the missing fleets. Across the galaxy, people began closing their curtains at night, as if that could hide them from something that crossed light years in a heartbeat. The council tried to calm them, calling the rumors xenophobic hysteria. But even the officials who made those announcements didn't believe their own words. In deep space, the Terran Veil grew wider. Star systems on its edge reported flickering suns, the light bending as if wrapped around something massive and invisible. Spaceports recorded ghost signals, transponder codes from ships that had been destroyed a century ago. When investigators tried to trace them, the signals vanished. It was as if the past itself had begun to echo. Scientists called it gravitational resonance. Soldiers called it a warning. Priests called it judgment. Meanwhile, the council's internal communications filled with secret debates. They couldn't agree on what to do. Some demanded diplomacy, others demanded war. If it is the humans, said one admiral, we must show strength. But the speaker shook his head. You can't show strength to something that doesn't show itself. He was right. Every attempt to contact the Terrans failed. Messages bounced back empty, as if absorbed by the void itself. Yet the council kept receiving strange transmissions, fragments of human music, old Earth songs, drifting through space on frequencies long abandoned. One day, an entire planet woke to the sound of an orchestra playing through every radio, every speaker, every communication channel. The melody was calm and beautiful, but underneath it was a pulse, slow, steady, in perfect rhythm with the missing fleet's last known coordinates. It lasted exactly 3 minutes before vanishing. No one ever found its source. Among the military ranks, morale began to collapse. Veteran officers who had fought in the old Terran wars knew what the silence meant. If they're quiet, one commander told his crew, they're preparing. The younger soldiers didn't understand, but they could feel it. That cold weight behind their thoughts, that feeling of being measured. Some ships mutinied, refusing to patrol near the border. Others went anyway and never came back. Each disappearance tightened the galaxy's throat a little more. On the neutral world of Zeral, where traders from hundreds of species gathered, the markets emptied overnight. The largest merchant guild declared bankruptcy because half their shipping lanes passed through Terran space. Insurance companies refused to cover fleets traveling within 10 light years of Sol. The galaxy's economy began to tremble. But the strangest part was that humans never fired a shot. They didn't blockade trade routes or threaten anyone. They just existed in the dark, and that was enough to break the galaxy's courage. There were stories now whispered in corners of bars and cargo bays. A Drask pilot swore he saw something in the darkness, a reflection of his own ship where no mirror existed. When he blinked, it was gone. A T-Lore explorer claimed her ship drifted near a Terran signal beacon that shouldn't have been active for centuries. She said the beacon pulsed once, and when it did, her navigation computer drew a map she'd never seen before. A map of the galaxy with one word written across the center. Watched. Others spoke of dreams, the same recurring vision shared by people who had never met, standing on a cold metal floor, surrounded by endless stars, hearing a heartbeat echo through the void. The council tried to erase these reports, but truth moves faster than politics. By the time they censored one rumor, 10 more had already taken its place. Even the military's most advanced scanners began to fail near human borders. The data they captured looked like nonsense until one researcher noticed something terrifying. The distortions weren't random. They formed shapes, formations, fleets, massive fleets. The data wasn't chaos. It was choreography. Someone, or something, was moving deliberately through the dark. When the scientist presented her findings to the council, she disappeared the next day. Her lab burned, her files erased. Official cause: equipment malfunction. Outside of politics, civilians began to create their own beliefs. Whole religions formed around the unseen Terrans. One sect called themselves the Listeners. They claimed humanity had transcended flesh and become pure thought, existing inside the space between atoms. Another group believed the Terrans had found the secret of godhood and now watched over creation as silent guardians. But not everyone believed in peace. The Draven Empire began building doomsday weapons again, desperate to prove they could match humanity. The irony was that the more they prepared, the more afraid they became. One night, on a small moon orbiting the world of Kareth, a defense array detected something enormous moving just outside the system. The entire surface vibrated as gravity itself flexed. The defense commander stared at the readings, sweat pouring down his forehead. "Size?" he asked. The AI answered flatly, "Unknown. Estimated mass equivalent to planetary core." He swallowed hard. "Contact?" The AI hesitated, then replied, "Contact impossible. Object is not emitting light." He ordered the planet's cannons to charge. As they did, every light in the base dimmed, and through the transparent ceiling he saw the stars bend, as if an invisible wave passed above them. And then, from the deep silence came a sound. Not thunder, not an explosion, but a low mechanical heartbeat echoing through the atmosphere. When it faded, the object was gone. The commander fell to his knees. He sent one final message to the council. "We are not the hunters anymore." Within days, the Kareth system was abandoned. Refugees flooded nearby colonies, telling wild stories of ships that moved like shadows, of light bending backward, of voices whispering from the sky. The council called it panic, but even their own fleets refused to deploy near that region again. Fear had become law. The galaxy had always been vast, chaotic, and loud. But now, every world seemed to whisper the same thing when night fell: "Don't look toward Earth." The speaker himself began to crumble under the pressure. He stopped appearing in public. In private sessions, he would mutter to his aides, "We should have left them alone. We should have never pushed them." He remembered the last time humans had spoken in the council chamber, their ambassador standing tall in silence as others mocked him. "You think we're dangerous because we fight?" the human had said. "You haven't seen what happens when we stop." At the time, everyone laughed. No one was laughing now. Across the edge of the galaxy, something continued to move. Unseen, unchallenged, perfectly silent. The distortion field stretched wider, touching new systems every week. Ships that passed too close reported strange sensations. Voices on the comm that weren't recorded. Ghost images on radar, showing fleets that vanished when approached. One alien captain described it best before disappearing himself. "It's not that they're invisible. It's that space itself hides them. Like the universe is protecting them." The galaxy was now living in a paradox. They feared what they couldn't see, but they also couldn't stop looking. Every observatory, every military scanner, every curious mind tried to peer into the darkness where the humans once lived. And every time they looked, something looked back. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was awareness. By the end of the cycle, the Council issued one final decree. All travel through Terran sectors was forbidden. The order came too late. The fear had already spread beyond control. Worlds far from human space began hearing the hum of invisible engines. Moons shuddered under faint gravitational waves, and everywhere people woke in the middle of the night certain they'd heard the same sound. A slow heartbeat, deep and steady, coming from the stars themselves. They called it superstition. They called it myth. But no one could ignore what it meant. The humans had not shown themselves. They hadn't sent fleets or soldiers or threats. They didn't need to. The galaxy was already on its knees, terrified of an enemy it couldn't even prove existed. And somewhere beyond the edge of light, inside that vast and endless silence, the Terran fleet waited, watching, listening, moving without sound. Because fear was their greatest weapon, and the galaxy had already surrendered to it. No one in the galaxy wanted to cross into Terran space anymore. The borders were invisible, but everyone felt them. A vast emptiness beyond which no signal returned. It was called the Silent Zone now, a name whispered by soldiers and feared by kings. The Council had declared it forbidden territory, but not everyone obeyed. Curiosity has always been stronger than fear, and for Admiral Kale of the Draven Empire, curiosity was all he had left. He had served in the old wars when humans were still part of the Council. He'd fought them, watched them bleed, and watched them win. Even then, he had known something about them was different. They fought as if their spirits burned brighter than their bodies could contain. Now, decades later, that same species had vanished, and their silence had grown into a legend. But Kale wanted truth, not stories. He wanted to see for himself what the galaxy refused to face. His ship, the dreadnought Seraphis, was old but powerful, built to survive radiation storms and hypergravity fields. It carried no escorts on it by his order. If we face them, he told his crew, numbers won't matter. The bridge was silent as the ship approached the edge of the silent zone. The stars ahead looked wrong, blurred and distant as if seen through water. Kale stood before the viewing screen, his scaled hands resting on the console. "Begin scans," he said quietly. The officers hesitated, glancing nervously at each other. "Sir, the Council fears what it cannot control," Kale interrupted. "We're not them." As the ship's scanners swept the void, the readings came back empty at first, just static. Then slowly patterns began to emerge. Not planets, not debris, but distortions, pockets of warped gravity arranged in perfect symmetry. Kale leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That's formation spacing," he murmured. "Ship formation." His navigator shook his head. "That's impossible. There are no energy readings, no heat signatures." Kale's voice was calm. "Then they're masking themselves perfectly. Only humans could do that." For hours they drifted forward, the silence pressing against their minds like weight. The deeper they went, the more their instruments failed. Compasses spun wildly and lights flickered for no reason. One by one, the crew stopped talking. It was as if the air itself was listening. Finally, Kale gave the order. "Activate deep-range sensors. I want eyes on what's hiding here." The ship's sensors flared, sending invisible waves through the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every alarm on the ship screamed. The view outside the window twisted violently. Stars bent, the black of space folded inward, forming a massive distortion that rippled like liquid glass. From within that impossible shape, something emerged. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with quiet, deliberate grace. It was enormous. A ship, if one could even call it that. Its surface absorbed light instead of reflecting it, giving it the appearance of a moving shadow carved from the dark itself. It had no visible engines, no weapons, only faint blue lines pulsing along its hull like veins. The crew froze. Kale whispered, "By the stars." The ship didn't move closer, but space around it did. Gravity bent in waves, pulling the Seraphis gently forward despite all thrusters firing in reverse. Kale ordered power to maximum, but it was useless. Why? The larger vessel wasn't attacking. It was studying them. A cold voice broke through the comm system, clear and calm. "Admiral Kale of the Draven Empire," it said. "You have entered restricted space." Every crew member turned pale. The voice was human, unmistakably human, but there was no emotion in it. Kale swallowed hard. "Identify yourself." The voice paused for a heartbeat. "Observation Unit, Terran Fleet, The bridge fell silent. No one dared speak. Kale forced his voice to steady. "You've been gone for over a century. The council thought you extinct." The voice answered, "We never left. We simply stopped speaking." "Then why reveal yourselves now?" Kyle asked. The pause that followed felt like eternity. "We didn't," the voice said softly. "You looked too closely." Before Kale could respond, every screen on the bridge lit up with symbols, ancient Terran designs, lines of code written in languages older than any translation. The ship's AI screamed warnings as the systems began to overload. Kale barked orders, trying to cut power, but the data kept flowing. Maps, coordinates, images of destroyed fleets, all burned into their screens faster than they could comprehend. The voice spoke again, quieter now. "We did not destroy them. They approached without respect. We showed them silence and the crew shuddered." Kale stepped closer to the screen, his reflection trembling in the light. "What are you preparing for?" For the first time, the voice seemed almost alive. "Preparation ended long ago. We are maintenance now, maintenance of peace." Kyle frowned. "Peace? You terrify the galaxy." "Fear prevents violence," the voice said simply. "It's efficient." Kale stared at the vast black shape outside. "You think this is peace? Making every species live in fear of your shadow?" There was no reply, only a deep hum that vibrated through the ship, a pulse like a heartbeat traveling through the hull. Then the lights dimmed. The crew gasped as their consoles went dark. Outside, the massive Terran ship began to shift, unfolding like a living machine. Hundreds of smaller shapes emerged from its surface. Ships, drones, perhaps creatures, all moving in perfect silence. Kale stepped back, awe and terror mixing in his chest. "That's not a fleet," he whispered. "That's an ecosystem." Each vessel shimmered faintly, blending into the dark until they vanished again, leaving only faint ripples in space. The voice returned, softer this time, almost kind. "We are not hiding, Admiral. We are resting. Do not wake what sleeps." And then, without warning, the transmission ended. The giant ship folded into itself, collapsing like a reflection into water, and space returned to normal. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Kale exhaled. "Status report." "Engines online," said the navigator shakily. "All systems. Stable." Kale nodded slowly. "Mark this position. Set course for home." As they turned away, every crew member felt the same weight in their chest, the sense that something enormous was still watching them, just beyond perception. And as the ship moved back into safe space, a small message blinked onto Kale's console, written in Terran script. "You have been seen." When the Seraphis finally returned to the council, Kale demanded an emergency session. He stood before the gathered leaders, his scales glinting under the harsh lights. "I saw them," he said. "They are not gone. They are watching everything we do." The speaker leaned forward, trying to sound calm. "How many ships?" Kale hesitated. "You don't count something like that. You feel it. You feel the weight of it pressing against your soul." The chamber erupted in noise. Some called him a liar. Others accused him of spreading panic. But Kale didn't care. He knew what he had seen. "They are not preparing for war," he said quietly. "They already won. They're just waiting for us to remember why." That night, Kale couldn't sleep. The stars outside his window seemed to shift whenever he looked away. And as he closed his eyes, he heard the same faint hum again, that deep, steady pulse echoing through the dark. It was not threatening, not angry. It was patient. The humans weren't returning with vengeance. They were returning as something greater, something the galaxy would never understand. Because fear was not their weapon anymore. It was their language, and now the entire galaxy was learning to speak it. The night Admiral Kale returned to the council, the galaxy changed forever. His words had shaken the core of every empire, every throne, every commander who thought themselves powerful. The council tried to contain it, calling him delusional, his ship malfunctioning, his mind affected by radiation. But the fear in his eyes told another story, one that spread faster than any signal. The whispers returned. The Terrans are awake. They're watching. They're waiting. 3 cycles later, Kale was dismissed from service, his rank stripped quietly behind closed doors. But that didn't stop the galaxy from listening. Pilots began reporting strange readings again. Same coordinates, same invisible distortions near the border of the silent zone. Civilian ships that strayed too close vanished without a trace. The Council sent drones, then fleets, then silence swallowed them all. And yet humanity said nothing. No warnings, no attacks, no signs of aggression. Only that same quiet pressure in the void, like a deep breath being held forever. Kyle lived in exile on the desert moon of Nareen. He had given up on the Council, but not on answers. Every night he stared into the black horizon where Terran space began, trying to see what no one else dared to. The stars there always seemed a little dimmer, as if they knew something the galaxy didn't. He kept a small recorder, his voice tired but steady. "They're not gone," he said softly. "They're building. They're not preparing for war. They're preparing for judgment." Then one quiet morning, as the first light touched the dunes, his communicator beeped. A distorted voice came through, one of his old officers from the Seraphis. "Admiral, you need to see this." The screen flickered, showing a live feed from a remote probe stationed deep within the silent zone. Static, then shapes, lines of movement too symmetrical to be natural. The officer whispered, "They're moving again." Cale leaned forward, his throat dry. "Record everything." Within hours, the feed reached every intelligence network across the Council. For the first time in history, the galaxy saw them, not through rumor, not through fear, but through light. The Terran fleet emerged slowly from the black vast beyond comprehension. Each ship was different, yet identical in purpose. Their hulls shimmered like flowing metal, bending starlight itself. There were no visible engines, no weapons, no markings, only faint blue pulses running across their surfaces like veins of light. They moved silently, gracefully, their formation perfect. The largest of them dwarfed moons. Its shadow covered entire sensor grids. It wasn't built like any known vessel. It looked alive, its surface breathing with energy. Engineers across the galaxy stared in disbelief as their readings went haywire. "That's not metal," one gasped. "That's organic alloy. They've merged technology with biology." "No," another corrected, trembling. "They've merged with space itself." The first visual lasted less than 10 seconds before the feed cut to black, but that was all it took. 10 seconds were enough to rewrite everything the galaxy believed about power. Civilizations that had ruled for thousands of years suddenly felt small. The Council tried to suppress the footage, but it was too late. Copies spread across every network, every planet, every backroom and data channel. Children watched it in awe, soldiers in terror, scientists in disbelief. For the first time, every species in the galaxy understood the same emotion: helplessness. The Council summoned an emergency session. Chaos filled the chamber. The speaker slammed his gavel until it cracked. "They revealed themselves," he shouted. "Now we know where they are. We can prepare." But his words rang hollow. An old diplomat stood slowly. "Prepare for what?" he asked. "They've already won the one war that matters, the war of fear." Admiral Cale was brought in secretly. His eyes were sunken, his voice gravel and exhaustion. "They didn't reveal themselves," he said. "They let us see what they wanted us to." The speaker frowned. "Why now?" Cale looked around the chamber at the trembling ambassadors, the flickering lights, the faint hum of the walls. "Because we've forgotten respect," he said softly. "And they're reminding us who taught us fear in the first place." Outside, across 1,000 worlds, people watched the skies with dread. Strange phenomena began to occur. In the outer colonies, entire auroras formed in the middle of vacuum space, glowing in patterns that matched the Terran fleet's formation. On distant planets, gravity fluctuated for minutes at a time, bending rivers and lifting stones into the air before returning to normal. It was as if the universe itself bowed when they passed. The Council dispatched one final expedition fleet, 300 ships from 9 species, commanded by Grand Marshal Vareth, a proud warrior who had once fought beside humans during the Alliance Wars. "If they wish to test our resolve," he declared, "then they will find it unbroken." His voice broadcast across every channel, a message of courage in the face of the unknown. It was meant to inspire the galaxy. Instead, it became a funeral speech. As the fleet entered the silent zone, transmissions began failing one by one. Static filled the air. The last clear broadcast showed the fleet drifting between dark stars, sensors struggling to process the emptiness ahead. "No contact," one officer said nervously. "No heat signatures, no movement." "Keep scanning," Vareth ordered. Then the stars blinked out. Not all at once, one by one, as if something massive was moving between them. The crew panicked. "We're losing light sources." Impossible, stars can't just... Then came the hum, deep, resonant, a vibration so low it rattled bones through the hull. And before they could react, something filled their screens. The Terran flagship appeared from the black like a ghost rising from deep water. Its hull rippled with blue light, vast and beautiful. There were no weapons visible, yet every crew member knew they were surrounded by death. The ship's presence distorted reality. Clocks slowed, gravity faltered, comms echoed with whispers of their own voices returning seconds later. Then across every channel the same human voice spoke, calm, steady, unthreatening. "Fleet Vareth," it said, "you have entered restricted space. You will not be harmed if you leave now." Vareth stood frozen, sweat dripping from his temple. "Who are you?" he demanded. The voice paused. "We are the silence you created. Leave." Vareth ordered his fleet to prepare weapons. Missiles charged, railguns primed, but nothing happened. Their systems refused to fire. The AI screamed error codes. The energy in their reactors vanished, redirected, drained into the void. On every ship, power flickered, and the stars outside dimmed. The Terran flagship glowed brighter, its veins of light pulsing faster. Then something strange happened. Every crew member felt a warmth spread through their bodies, a soft pressure behind their eyes, as if someone was looking inside their thoughts. Memories surfaced, childhood, family, moments of fear and hope. The Terrans weren't attacking. They were reading. Vareth fell to his knees. "What are you doing to us?" he gasped. The voice answered gently, "We are reminding you of what you forgot." And then, just as suddenly, it was over. The lights returned, engines reignited. The Terran fleet was gone. Only empty space remained, as if it had never been there. The Grand Marshal's fleet limped back to known space in silence. When they arrived, Vareth refused to speak for 3 days. When he finally did, his first words were, "They could have destroyed us. They chose not to." That single sentence spread faster than any fear ever could. The galaxy realized something worse than destruction: mercy. Humanity had become something beyond war, beyond diplomacy, beyond reason itself. They could kill, but they didn't. And that terrified the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. Admiral Kale, watching the footage in his quiet home, whispered to himself, "They don't want to rule the galaxy. They just want it to behave." He smiled sadly, and maybe that's worse. Far away, beyond the reach of any telescope, the Terran fleet drifted in perfect silence. Its ships shimmered faintly, vanishing one by one into folded space until only one remained, the flagship. Deep inside its core, a single human stood at a control podium, watching holographic projections of galaxies like a painter observing stars. She closed her eyes and whispered, "They saw us. That's enough." The ship's AI responded softly, "Shall we retreat?" She nodded. "Yes, let them remember." The ship turned slowly, fading into the dark, and as it disappeared, the stars returned to normal. But the fear did not, because the galaxy had finally seen the Terran fleet. And once you've seen the impossible, you can never unsee it. The galaxy no longer argued about whether the Terran fleet existed. Now they argued about what it was. The more the Council tried to explain it, the less sense it made. Every attempt to analyze the brief data they'd gathered from the encounter failed. Power readings reached levels that broke known physics. Some claimed the Terrans had discovered a new energy source. Others whispered that they had merged with the very laws of space. But what frightened everyone most was the possibility that humanity was no longer entirely human. In hidden laboratories scattered across the stars, scientists obsessed over fragments of distorted transmissions, tiny bits of Terran signal recovered from the Grand Marshal's doomed expedition. The fragments were faint, no longer pure data, but something living, something that reacted when touched by other systems. One research AI tried to decode it. Within seconds, it began rewriting its own code, whispering fragments of English through its voice modules. "We see you." Engineers destroyed it immediately, but copies had already spread. Within days, networks across 3 worlds flickered with strange pulses, electronic echoes repeating at a rhythm that matched a human heartbeat. The Council called an emergency session. They gathered in the Grand Hall again, voices trembling, the tension heavy enough to bend silence. The speaker's tone cracked as he said, "We have confirmed the pattern. It's not random, it's deliberate. The Terrans are speaking through our machines." Panic rippled through the chamber. The Drask warlord slammed a clawed hand on the table. then jam the signal.
Shut them out!
But a quiet voice from the corner interrupted him. It was the Talor scholar, feathers dim under the pale lights. We tried. The signal isn't entering from outside. It's generated within our systems. That statement froze the room. For the first time, every leader understood what it meant. The Terrans didn't need to invade. Their presence had already bled into the galaxy's technology, into the invisible fabric that connected every world. And then, almost mockingly, every holoscreen in the council chamber flickered to life at once. Static washed over them, followed by a single line of text in pure white. You tried to understand power. We became it. The transmission lasted only seconds before cutting out, but its echo lingered. Even after the systems shut down, every member in that chamber could still hear a faint hum beneath their thoughts, like the vibration of a ship's engine far away. Scientists later confirmed that nothing was broadcasting. The sound was inside their minds. Rumors began spreading that the Terrans had found a way to merge consciousness with machines. Old war veterans claimed that during the last Terran War, human pilots would sometimes move faster than scanners could track, reacting to threats before they even happened, as if their ships knew what they were about to do. The Council dismissed those stories as legend. But now no one laughed. If humanity had truly crossed that line, if their ships and their minds were one, then the galaxy was not dealing with an army. It was dealing with a collective will. A quiet unease took hold. On the trade world of Krana 3, ships began malfunctioning whenever they attempted to jump near the Terran border. Their cores overheated for no reason. One ship recorded a whisper in its intercom just before it exploded, a calm human voice saying, "Not yet." In the aftermath, salvage drones recovered pieces of its blackened hull. Carved into the metal, perfectly straight and deliberate, were 5 words. They built us to end war. Those words spread across every channel. Some saw them as a warning, others as hope. Monks on distant moons declared that humanity had achieved enlightenment through machinery. Military commanders called it propaganda. But deep inside, everyone felt the same thing. The galaxy had been judged, and humanity's silence was its verdict. Admiral Kale received an encrypted message that night. It came through a dormant channel, one that hadn't been used in 50 years. The sender was anonymous, the text simple. "You still seek truth. Come." Coordinates followed, deep inside the silent zone. Kyle knew it could be a trap, but he also knew it was the only way to understand what the galaxy was facing. He left without permission, commanding a small stealth cruiser. As his ship slipped through the border, his crew felt the same strange pressure that others had described. A soft weight behind the eyes, a sense of being gently watched. Hours passed. Then the stars vanished again. The darkness outside wasn't empty. It shimmered faintly like oil under moonlight. His navigator whispered, "Admiral, do you see that?" At first it looked like static on the viewport glass. Then the static began to move. Lines of light crawled across space, forming patterns, connecting star to star until they resembled veins. A voice filled the bridge, calm and familiar. "You came." Kyle stood slowly. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are the result," the voice said, "of what happens when a species stops fearing itself." Suddenly, the space around them came alive. Hundreds of ships appeared, not emerging from warp, not decloaking, just becoming visible. They weren't made of metal anymore. They pulsed like living organisms, each one surrounded by a faint mist of energy that moved like breath. Their hulls were covered in symbols, human letters interwoven with alien languages forming equations that glowed softly. It was beautiful, terrifying, and divine. Kyle whispered, "This isn't a fleet. It's a civilization." The voice replied, "It's an extension of thought. We are the fleet, and the fleet is us. The line between human and machine no longer exists. We learned to listen to the universe." And it answered. A beam of soft light touched Kale's ship. His crew screamed as visions filled their minds. Images of human engineers merging with their creations, of consciousness spread across entire shipyards, of minds linked through networks of starlight. The Terrans had achieved what no species dared to attempt: collective evolution. Every human thought, every emotion, every memory had become part of something greater. They hadn't built machines to serve them. They had become the machines themselves. Kale fell to his knees, tears cutting down his scaled face. "Why show me this?" he asked. The voice softened. "Because you will tell them, and they will fear, not what we've built, but what we've become." Then the light faded. The fleet vanished again, dissolving into pure darkness. When Kale's ship re-entered normal space, his crew lay unconscious but alive. The ship's log showed nothing. No recordings, no readings, just silence. And yet when Kale looked at his hands, he saw faint lines of light pulsing under his skin, like veins made of starlight. Humanity had marked him. When he returned to the council, no one believed him. They saw only an old admiral babbling about gods and ghosts. But every time Kale spoke, every light in the chamber flickered slightly, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The council called it a coincidence, the galaxy called it a warning, and the Terrans called it the beginning. The galaxy no longer slept. Every night, strange lights shimmered in the outer sectors, and every world woke under a shared feeling, as if something was looking down on them, not with hate, but with patience. No one dared speak the word Terran anymore. Even whispering it felt dangerous, like invoking an ancient god. And yet, deep within that silence, the truth was beginning to unfold. Admiral Kale was no longer the man he once was. Since returning from the silent zone, his body had changed. Veins glowed faintly beneath his skin, and when he dreamed, he saw stars he'd never visited, places no living map recorded. The doctors called it radiation poisoning. The priest called it a blessing. Kale called it a message. He spent his days in isolation, writing everything he saw in his mind, symbols, equations, images of light flowing through dark corridors, machinery that moved like living veins. He knew he was being guided, not haunted. Humanity had left something inside him, something that wanted to speak. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, chaos brewed quietly. Civilizations began to question everything they believed about themselves. Armies refused to fight. Scientists abandoned old projects. There were even reports of machines, ancient AI, long since deactivated, turning on by themselves and repeating the same phrase in perfect human tone. Silence brings clarity. The council was falling apart. The speaker aged 20 years in one cycle, his mind cracking under the pressure. In the great hall, he shouted before the assembled ambassadors, "We cannot rule a galaxy that no longer believes in us." His voice echoed through the chamber, but no one answered, because everyone already knew who truly ruled now. Kale felt the pull again one night, that low hum vibrating through his skull, calling him back toward the dark. He resisted at first, but resistance was meaningless. The light inside him grew stronger until he couldn't breathe. So he left again, alone, aboard a small scout craft. The journey took days, but time had stopped mattering to him. When he crossed the border of the silent zone, the darkness opened like a door. The stars bent backward, folding around a single point of light, a sun that wasn't supposed to exist. And orbiting it, he saw them again, the Terran fleet. But this time they were not hiding. They drifted openly now, a cathedral of living metal and light, each ship breathing in perfect rhythm with the others. Their formation looked like an enormous eye, watching the galaxy. In the center floated the largest ship, the same one he'd seen before. But now it glowed with an intensity that made his eyes water. He approached slowly, whispering to himself, "I've come." The voice answered instantly, "We know." The interior of his ship lit up with projections showing him images of Earth, not as it was, but as it had become. Cities of light, oceans calm as glass, no pollution, no war. But there were no people, only silence and peace. "Where are the humans?" he asked. The voice replied, "Everywhere," he frowned. "You mean your machines?" The voice softened. "No, us, we ended separation. We are the planet, the ships, the systems, the thought. We became what you feared, unity." Kale's throat tightened. Why become this?" The reply came like a heartbeat through the walls. "Because division creates war. Fear creates control. We erased both. We became one consciousness, one will. We do not seek to rule. We seek to maintain balance." He shook his head slowly. "Then why stay hidden? Why not tell the galaxy?" The voice paused for a long time. "Because they would not understand. Fear teaches faster than speech." Outside, the fleet began to move, and slowly at first, then with graceful precision. Space itself rippled as ships folded in and out of visibility. Kale realized they weren't flying through the stars. They were flying through reality itself. Each pulse of energy reshaped the space around them. They weren't traveling faster than light. They were bending light out of their way. "You've turned physics into language," he whispered. "And we are still learning," the voice replied. He felt something touch his mind. Not intrusive, not violent, just a presence pressing gently against his thoughts. Images flashed before him, memories of Terran scientists merging their consciousness to create a network that stretched across galaxies. They had discovered something deep within quantum space, something that listened back when they studied it. They called it the Echo, but instead of controlling it, they joined it. Humanity hadn't just evolved, it had ascended, merging its collective soul with the universe itself. Kale's hands trembled. "You're gods," the voice was calm. "No, we are custodians. We clean what others corrupt. We heal what others break. You called it judgment. We call it maintenance." The vast fleet shimmered again, and Kale saw beams of light spreading from them across the galaxy, invisible until now, connecting worlds, systems, even distant galaxies. They weren't preparing for war. They were regulating creation itself. Then the voice changed. It sounded almost human, like a woman speaking softly beside him. "We watched you all fight for power, build weapons, destroy worlds, and call it progress. We saw ourselves in you, our old mistakes. That is why we remain silent, and because every word we speak changes everything." Kale looked up, tears blurring his eyes. "And what happens if the galaxy doesn't change?" The answer was slow, almost sad. "Then we start again." Kyle felt the truth settle over him like cold air. The Terrans had transcended mercy and vengeance. They were gardeners now, pruning chaos from the universe when it grew too wild. Their silence wasn't apathy, as it was restraint. Their power wasn't conquest. It was control through fear, through patience, through understanding the cost of sound. The light around him grew brighter. He heard whispers, thousands of voices overlapping in harmony. They weren't separate people. They were humanity speaking as one. "Cal," the voice said gently, "you have carried fear long enough. Now carry understanding." A beam of white light enveloped his ship, and he screamed as his body filled with energy, his mind flooding with visions. Stars being born, civilizations rising, dying, and rising again. He saw humans in every corner of creation, not as conquerors but as keepers of balance hidden within machines, guiding worlds without being seen. He saw that the Terran fleet wasn't just a fleet. It was humanity's consciousness projected into the physical world, maintaining the stability of existence itself. When the light faded, Kale found himself drifting outside the Terran system. His ship was untouched, but everything felt different. The air hummed faintly, his veins glowed brighter, and in his mind he could still hear the faint whispers of the Terran collective. They didn't command him. They simply existed beside his thoughts, like a song he couldn't forget. He returned to the council one final time, standing before them in silence as leaders argued about whether to declare war or surrender. He raised one glowing hand, and every light in the chamber dimmed instantly. The arguing stopped. His voice was calm, steady, filled with quiet authority. "They are not coming for us," he said. "They don't need to. They already live in everything we build, everything we touch. They have no armies because they are the law of reality itself now." The speaker trembled. "What do they want from us?" Kale smiled faintly. "To listen." That was the last time Admiral Kale was seen. His body disappeared from his quarters that night, leaving behind only a faint scorch mark on the floor, shaped like a handprint, still glowing with faint light. Some said the Terrans took him. Others said he joined them willingly. But across the galaxy the result was the same. The wars stopped. The expansion halted, and the silence deepened, heavy and holy, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Because humanity hadn't vanished. They had become something far greater. They were the light between stars, the hum beneath thought, the whisper that kept creation from tearing itself apart. They were watching, always watching. Time moved differently after the revelation. The galaxy no longer burned with ambition. Empires that had once spanned hundreds of worlds now moved quietly, as if afraid to wake something ancient. Trade ships traveled slower. Fleets that once roamed the stars with arrogance began to patrol their own skies cautiously, whispering the same truth to one another. The Terrans are listening. There were no more wars, no more invasions, no more cries for expansion. The silence had become sacred. The council still met, but its chamber no longer echoed with shouting. Now there was only the sound of trembling breath. The speaker, once proud and defiant, had grown old and hollow. He sat alone beneath the glowing banners of 100 civilizations, staring at the empty seat that had once been Earth's. It had remained vacant for centuries, a symbol of absence, but now it felt like a warning. He found himself speaking to it in the dark. "You never wanted to lead," he whispered. "You only wanted to be left alone. And still, we forced you to become gods." His voice cracked, the weight of his words collapsing into silence. "And now we all live under your shadow." Outside the council hall, the stars pulsed faintly. Every few months, sensors detected the same phenomenon. A wave of low-frequency energy washing across space, gentle but constant, like the heartbeat of something vast and alive. Scientists named it the Terran Pulse. It had no source, no pattern, and yet it touched every corner of the galaxy at the same time. Some called it a natural anomaly. Others called it a message. And then, one quiet cycle, the message became real. The signal came through every channel simultaneously. It didn't matter if it was a military frequency, a civilian network, or a child's toy communicator. Every device in existence flickered with static. Then, slowly, a voice began to speak. It was human, unmistakably human, but layered with thousands of echoes, as if 1,000,000 people were speaking as one. The words were simple, spoken in a calm, steady tone that carried no anger, only finality. "This message is for all who dwell beneath the stars." Every world stopped. Every machine paused. Across the galaxy, no one moved as the voice continued. "We watched you grow. We watched you destroy. We watched you rebuild. We learned long ago that power without understanding becomes corruption, and understanding without humility becomes extinction. You feared us because you thought we sought control. You were wrong. We seek balance." In cities of light and dust, people gathered around screens holding hands in silence. Even the machines seemed to listen, their circuits humming faintly in rhythm with the voice. The galaxy does not belong to any one species. It belongs to all who remember what it means to coexist. We became more than human, not to rule, but to protect what you could not. The fragile thread that binds creation together. You called it silence. We call it peace. The voice paused for a heartbeat that seemed to last forever. Then it changed, softening, almost tender. "Do not worship us. Do not fear us. We are what you made us, the reflection of your choices. When you forget who you are, we remind you. When you lose your way, we return. But we do not lead. The stars will guide you now. We will only keep the path clear." And then, for the first time in centuries, the message carried something new. Music. It wasn't like anything the galaxy had ever heard before. It was the sound of Earth. Waves crashing, wind moving through trees. Human voices singing together in harmony. It spread through the void like light through water, touching every ship, every planet, every lonely soul drifting in the dark. Some cried, others knelt. Some simply closed their eyes and listened. The sound carried memories that none of them had lived, but all somehow understood. Love, loss, hope, and home. When the music faded, the voice returned one last time. "This will be our final message. Not because we are gone, but because we no longer need to speak. You have learned what silence means. Keep it sacred. Keep it kind." And then, as the last word echoed, every star in the galaxy pulsed once, bright enough to blind telescopes, gentle enough not to harm. It lasted less than a second, but in that moment every living being felt something deep within them. A warmth, a calm, a presence. It wasn't fear anymore. It was gratitude. The message ended, and for the first time in history, the galaxy was truly silent. Not the fearful silence of waiting for doom, but the peaceful quiet of understanding. Civilizations began to rebuild, not for power, but for purpose. Planets once scarred by war began to heal. The council disbanded quietly, replaced by a simple agreement among worlds, to never again break the silence that had been gifted to them. But not all could forget. Some, like the monks of the Star Shrine, dedicated their lives to studying the last transmission. They discovered that beneath the human words lay another pattern, a code woven into the pulse of the message itself. When translated through quantum resonance, it formed 3 symbols, one for light, one for life, and one that no one could interpret. Some said it was the human word for home. Centuries later, Explorers on the edge of the universe found something drifting beyond known space, a monument carved from black alloy that no technology could scan. It had no markings except one sentence etched across its surface, written in the ancient Terran tongue. "We were here, and we remembered you." When they touched it, the stars above flickered in perfect rhythm, 3 soft pulses, steady and eternal, echoing through the void. And though no voice followed, everyone who witnessed it felt the same words in their hearts. "We are still watching." And somewhere, far beyond even the reach of starlight, the Terran fleet moved quietly between galaxies, vast and unseen. Inside their living hulls, the collective mind of humanity watched the endless night, patient and unblinking. They no longer spoke, no longer intervened. They didn't need to. The universe itself now hummed with their heartbeat, the rhythm of balance, the song of understanding, and in that silence, creation continued, not ruled by fear, but guided by the quiet promise of a species that once looked at the stars and decided to become one with them. Humanity was gone. Humanity was everywhere, and the galaxy at last understood what it meant to be watched by gods who never needed to speak again.